This is the Collecting Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Purse, here with your co-host, Bill Hamill.
I'm so much more comfortable collecting real estate than I am collecting other stuff.
Asaf, thank you so much for being here today. Can you tell us more about your real estate background?
So I've been in real estate pretty much right out of college. Graduating college, I started working for a money management company, Sanford Bernstein, for a few months. It didn't work out. And then I started, that's a story on its own, but I started working with my dad a little bit in real estate, renting apartments in the Bronx, doing some small stuff in New York City, but mostly in the Bronx. Really cut my teeth on learning how to qualify tenants, dealing, with applications, dealing with the landlords, dealing with the supers. Everybody, like the big buildings in the Bronx, so each building usually has a super. So that was definitely a fast-paced learning experience. I credit my dad a lot for teaching me a lot of the stuff.
Can you explain what a super is for any listeners that might not know?
You might remember Joe Pesci, right? The super. There's a lot of you young guys might not, but I know Bill and I do. It's a superintendent, basically, somebody who is a building manager. He usually gets an apartment, either subsidized or free, and you take care of the building, deal with the tenants, help the landlord and the management company manage the building properly, keep it clean, handle work orders, and so on. And the most important thing, collect rents.
Yeah, that's a very important function in this business. We've got to pay our bills and put food on the table. I didn't know of your New York City experience in real estate. We met years ago and we got going in Albany, but tell us about that Bronx experience in real estate investing and property management in relation to the Albany, New York real estate investment experience.
It's two different worlds. And in the manner of down there, the applicants pay a commission. They have to pay a broker fee, which that's what I was doing. I was an agent and making money on every rental that I would rent out. Application processes are pretty much still the same, although, in Albany, it used to be amazing. You can evict somebody within 30 to 45 days of starting the process, sometimes even as low as 25 days. Those good old days are gone with this New York State Tenant Protection Act that they passed, and now it takes you 6 months, and during this pandemic, you can't even evict anybody. But as far as New York City, it's just a totally different ballgame. Clientels are different. You have a lot more scammers down there, so you really have to keep your eye out and do your due diligence on all applications. On the flip side, there's a ton of different programs to help you. So we were working in the Bronx, so it was a lot more medium to lower income housing, and it was you had dozens and hundreds of different programs. You need to know the ins and outs. Section 8, they had a program called Jiggets, Ewrap. It was a whole bunch of different things.
So that New York City market, with New York City being so expensive, that's what everybody thinks of New York City, the expensive housing. They have to have all those programs so lower income people can actually live there.
I think programs are a great thing, not a way of life. If you help people subsidize their rent and make them accountable as well, that's great. But when you give everybody something for free, nobody appreciates it. It's the same thing as a super. I had a super in one of my buildings, and he's like, well, I'm supposed to get a free apartment. I'm like, nothing in the world is free. You have to work for it. And then when I signed lease with him, I gave him a $1,200 apartment for $500 a month. That's a pretty good discount. And he's like, well, it's supposed to be free. And I said, well, if it's free, you would never appreciate it. But he still didn't appreciate it regardless, so it didn't matter.
Well, it's all part of that bottom line. You're figuring out what the fair compensation is for your super, and you're figuring in your apartment, you're figuring in the utilities, and you're figuring in how much you're actually paying that person in a paycheck. And I guess that's something where we have to be upfront and explain that so people do understand what your deal is.
I agree.
How did you go from signing leases in the Bronx to being a landlord in Albany? What was that process like?
So it was right after I graduated in June or May 1998, and started the job with Sanford Bernstein, and left and started working with my dad. And it was around October when I first started. I came up to visit some friends, hang out for the weekend in Albany with some college friends. And I started looking, once you're in real estate, all of a sudden you see a for sale sign or anything like that. You start to pique your interest a little bit. So I saw how down the Albany market was, how cheap it was, honestly. Even though the rents were low, but financially it made sense. Taxes were extremely high in comparison, but the return on investment was good. And the most important thing is the barrier of entry, the cost of capital, the cost to get in was minimal. So for $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, you can jump in on a 2-family house and get a mortgage if you're buying it for $75,000, you get a $50,000 mortgage. So, you're able, coming up with $15,000, $20,000 is a lot easier than coming up with hundreds of thousands like you would in a New York City environment.
I know we met about 20 years ago when you did come in from New York City. And I remember meeting your father and you two coming in. It was fun watching you take over the city. Slowly but surely. Can you tell us what your original roles were or role was, when you first came in, as you were able to, gain ground in Albany?
So, I give a lot of credit to my dad. He taught me, I would say, very much most of the stuff I know. He was a great father. He is a great father. Teaches me, he was never soft on me. He always told me the truth, whether I like to hear it or not, but that's what you need in life. You can't keep coddling somebody and tell them, oh, you're doing a great job. And then they wake up at 25 years old and they're a lost soul and they're still, I would hate to say it, but breastfeeding still. It sucks to say it that way, but it's the truth. So, we really cut our teeth. I remember going through different situations, acquiring one by one. I met a broker, Dan Rogers. You probably remember him, Bill. Great guy. He got me. He was the broker on the first deal we did, which was on Hamilton Street, and then I bought 3-4 properties off of. And we used a bunch of different creative financing things, holding paper, little down payments. So that really helped me grow from 1 to 3, 4, 5 houses within the first year or two. Actually, after the first house we closed, we had to close at night because my brother and my dad came up, and we signed the paperwork like 8:30 at night and went out to eat dinner and celebrate. And my dad and my brother were driving back down to the city, and my brother fell asleep at the wheel, and they totaled their car. And thank God they walked away with nothing, just not even a scratch. Thank God for that. And I sometimes I say to God, thank you for, because that 1 minute could have changed my whole life. And I probably wouldn't be here today, where I'm at, if it was a different end of story for that car crash. And as far as, my dad taught me a lot of different things. And then the difference between us was I was gearing more towards student housing. And then we started going to these auctions in Albany, and in one specific auction, we bought like 11 low income housing, like Second Street, First Street, and that was my dive into that market, which about 3 years ago I got out on like most of my Arbor Hill properties, and concentrate a lot more just on the student housing and kind of upper class housing.
No, that's interesting, because if anybody listening doesn't know the Arbor Hill location, I guess we would, tell me if you agree, we would consider that more of the war zone type neighborhoods. Tell us the difference between those types of neighborhoods and the student neighborhoods. What's the difference in management?
Some people would say the student neighborhood is the war zone, but the war zone there is garbage, not gunshots. So it's Arbor Hill. I liked it. I was really helping to try to bring it back up, put together a portfolio of 25, 30 houses. But it's just like, here's my example. In Arbor Hill, you have great tenants and you have horrible tenants, just like anything else in life. You have 5-10% of the population ruining it for the rest of the people. And it's a problem where, you rent these apartments and there's just so much money you can actually dump into them. I wasn't one of these guys who was going to get grants and all this other stuff. I basically laid out my own money or financing in order to rehab these places. So, you take a house on the corner of 2nd Street and Judson that's 1,800, 2,000 square feet, and it's worth back, even as far back as 6-7 years ago, was worth $25,000, $35,000. And you probably couldn't sell it for that much. And you uplift that house and you put it on the corner of Quail and New Scotland, that house is worth $250,000. Or if you put it on the corner of Washington and Quail, that house might be worth $175,000. And that's where in real estate you really have that location, because I was only getting $650 for a 4-bedroom apartment on 2nd Street, where on the same size apartment on Quail and Hudson, I was getting $1,200. So that's really, I was working 3 times harder to make as much money on the same investments.
But it sounds like you were successful in these lower income areas, even though it was much more difficult. So what was there any habits or any tricks or skills specifically that you used that made you successful in that area?
You really need to understand the person's situation and sympathize, empathize, or just don't give a damn. You have to have that balance between those 3 things and understand their situation. That helps you make a decision how you can help somebody. For example, whenever I went to court for eviction, I would go outside in the hallway and give them a payment plan. So give them a chance. My goal is not to evict somebody, because if you evict somebody, you lost 2, 3, 4 months worth of rent. You have to clean up the apartment, turn it over, re-rent it, sign new leases, move the tenant in. It's a 4 to 6 month process at that point. And nowadays, it's probably more like a year process. And, when you're not getting your rent for 6 months to a year, you can't survive. You can't, and it's a bad situation. This is what New York State fails to understand. The more restrictions you put on landlords, the less the landlord is going to be incentivized to keep up his property. You know, I dump a ton of money into my properties that I manage. We take care of it. We do the best. These are 120-year-old houses, so that it's not easy to maintain. And you know, the tenant base is rough on the units. You know, with the students, it's usually their first apartment, so they don't know how to run the dishwasher. They don't know how to run the washing machine. You know, that to make sure that the shower curtain is all the way inside the tub so it doesn't leak downstairs. And, you know, they don't even know how to change a light bulb. And, you know, I pay a guy close to $1,000 a week just to go around and clean up the properties and take out the trash for the tenants and put the cans back because they don't do it. And if it doesn't get done, then the trash accumulates, mice come, roaches come, problems come, the garbage gets strewn all over the yard and the front, and it just leads to, so I'd rather spend money and have a guy keep the properties clean, and he does a great job. And I take great pride in what I do. I don't really try to cut corners or anything. I just do the best I can. And when I go to sleep at night, I know I sleep on a clean pillow, that I did the best I can that day for people.
There's a lot to unpack there. I appreciate everything you said. I recall seeing you the last time I saw you in court. It was pre-pandemic, and you know we have to have an attorney in court because we have our properties and business entities. And it was great to see Asaf had his attorney, who was basically just there. But he was out there one by one handling every one of his tenants. He was negotiating payment plans with each one. His attorney wasn't even part of the process. He was handling his business. At the same time, you know, appreciating these new laws that our politicians are creating, that they're not landlords. They don't understand the byproducts of what these new laws do. Can you continue to expand on if they extend the moratorium past January 15th because it's winter time is what I'm anticipating? You know, how are we able to improve our properties at that point?
You know, luckily now in the last week or two, I actually started getting some Ewrap money. So that's at least catching a few people up. But I pretty much have had a full-time girl at the office. She's done a great job. Be on the phone and emails with Ewrap in New York State for the last 2 months. So it's costing me, you know, let's just say almost 5-10 grand just having this one employee work for the last 2-3 months, getting this money. And a lot of tenants are not cooperating for whatever reason, because they don't want to, because those are the same tenants that have been taking advantage of this. You know, it's the same thing with the unemployment. I call it fun employment. Up until, you know, Labor Day in September, people were double dipping. They were getting their unemployment plus their extra bonus, making more money or similar money than they were working. And it's amazing how you put out ads for the last 6 months and got no resumes. And as soon as January 5th September 5th, every application started coming in like crazy. They are very anti-business, anti-landlord. And I don't mind protecting the tenant. I agree. But the bottom line is, if the landlord doesn't get their rent, they can't keep up the property. They're not going to keep putting money in to a business venture that doesn't give them any fruits at the end of the day. You know, and if they keep extending these moratoriums, it's going to be a major, major problem. And again, all you're doing is breeding bad behavior, because don't tell me, I understand the pandemic, is a real thing. Both my parents just had COVID last month. And still recovering, thank God. We're in the hospital, but and they're still very weak. 6 weeks later, it's a real thing, and I'm not denying it. But look out there, everybody's hiring, looking for people to work, and nobody can find people. Inflation is through the roof, and if cost of building materials, cost of labor, everything is skyrocketing, and we can't keep. Yesterday, National Grid announced 31% increase in gas rates.
Asaf, for anyone that doesn't know, can you explain what Ewrap is, maybe what it stands for, and some of the problems that are associated with that program?
Ewrap is the New York State Emergency Rental Assistance Program. Basically, with the moratorium and landlords not being able to evict their residents, they put this program in order to help tenants catch back up on their rent.
In your experience, has the program worked successfully for what it was intended to do?
Hopefully it will. It's finally starting to trickle in. And I mean trickle like drop, not like open the faucet trickle, It's almost like a leak, a slow leak trickle, so it's tough because you really, like I said before, we have a lady at the office for 3 straight months. All she's doing is dealing with these applications, chasing the tenants to do what they need to do, and then finally yesterday or 2 days ago, they opened up a portal that landlords are able to file without their tenants' permission, just giving the facts. Hey, landlord XYZ owes me $10,000, and I'm not exaggerating. I've had tenants who owe me $15,000, $18,000, $20,000, and just are using and abusing the system right now. And they're at least catching up on some. Hopefully, and now they only put out $125 million. That's not even enough to cover 5 city blocks with the amount of money owed down there, or even one borough down there. So you're going to give $125 million for the whole entire New York State? I don't know what they're trying to do over there down at the Capitol. But
I know. I was just putting my thumb up to you because I thought I was going to give you some good news, but I should have figured that you knew all about the new LRAP program, which is allowing landlords to apply for some relief without having to depend on the tenant to fill out the application, which has been very burdensome and very tedious if the tenant doesn't want to cooperate, which is the case in a lot of ways. So I agree. I diligently have to put that on my list today to start filling out applications to do that so I can recover some of my back rent. And 125 million. I know big landlords such as you and several others just in the small city of Albany that are owed, in some cases, 6 figures. So, once you get into other parts of the city in New York City, how long does 125 million gonna last?
Like I said, very short. They had $2.2 billion or 22 billion, either 2.2 billion, and until the federal government actually kicked New York State in the butt a little bit and said, hey, get this money out and make sure it's committed by the end of September, otherwise we're taking it away. I guess that's what they needed, a little push from behind.
So you mentioned recently selling off a lot of your properties in the lower income Albany area. What are you focused on now? What is your business plan moving forward?
I had an opportunity to package a good amount of properties and sell them to an investor. And I sold 16 properties in February of 2018, and 4 of them I held back, and I had to take back the buildings, which I've since sold them. because the person also just stopped paying me. Um, and unfortunately for me, those prices of those buildings have probably not doubled, but went up a good 60 to 80% since I sold them. So I guess I wasn't as good as I thought I was, but
Yeah. Well, welcome to the club. I sold a lot of our small properties. I wasn't doing it to time the market. There was a variety of reasons after 25 years of self managing, but I was hoping that I was doing it perfectly timed, which wasn't the case because it was a year and a half ago. And just like you said, that the market continues to climb. It sounds like you did some seller financing on those properties, or
12 out of the 16 we sold were straight out sale. A little bit of financing held back, and then 4 of them I had to take back. But, holding a mortgage is not as sexy as it sounds. It might be nice to come back and sit down in your house and keep collecting that 8, 9, 10%, 12%, whatever you charge. But, it really hits the fan when you have to start taking the property back.
like evicting a tenant.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same thing. People think landlord is a very sexy business. Oh, you're sitting back with your feet on your desk with your cigar in your mouth and have that vision. But at the end of the day, as Bill knows, we're up at 6 o'clock in the morning till 9, 10 o'clock at night, busting our butt and trying to do the best we can. And sometimes tenants take advantage of it. And unfortunately, that's the society we're living in these days. And the problem is we're allowing them to do it like that.
Yeah, that's the sad part. And it's funny you say that. Yeah, the landlord's kicking back at their desk, smoking a cigar. The one thing that, or many things that we have in common, we ran around self-managing large portfolios for many, many years. And most of the time we would run into each other at Home Depot, catch up in 5 or 10 minutes. But I'll speak for myself where, I'm scrambling. I was at Home Depot where I had about, 20 minutes to do 45 minutes of shopping so I could get material back to our maintenance guys to keep them moving along because we had work to get done. Let me ask you, knowing that you were self-managing for many, many years, do you still self-manage all your properties and how involved are you with that process?
So, luckily I've grown a little bit in the last few years where I've expanded my staff. So I'm still hands-on and overseeing, but I'm also, I guess that I learned how to delegate, let's just put it that way, where I'm just almost quarterbacking things from behind and following up and letting the people underneath me do their job. And hopefully they're doing it in a good enough way that I don't have to be involved in an everyday, day-to-day, minute detail. Hopefully they're just taking care of it without me having to babysit them. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. You just have to keep your hand on the trigger and know what's going on. Like for example, I still have my phone number on the for rent signs. And the reason being, I like to know what the market is. I know if I see those phone calls coming in and my apartments are not getting rented, then that's a problem. And I keep my feel, let's rewind back a little bit. In 2005, 2006, I was doing my MBA program at UNY Albany part-time at night. And we had to do our thesis. So in the spring of 2006, I presented a big thesis and I said, the great real estate explosion of 2007, 2008. So I presented it for my thesis in the spring of 2006. And the dean of the school and the other people are like, what are you talking about? Real estate is not going to collapse, you know? I said, you watch. And I gave all these examples. And then in 2009, I'm at a U Albany basketball game, and she comes up to me. She's like, you made that presentation. I said, yeah, because when you're in the trenches, you see what's going on a lot faster, what's happening on the ground and at the war on the field, than the guy sitting at the top of the high tower, you know, at the Federal Reserve, or any CEO at these big banks. Because by the time when you're seeing how and I think we're almost like that right now, but it's not going to be as drastic as it was 2007, 2008. Everything very frothy, low rates, you know, everything's being, and there's a lot of cash out on the sidelines right now. So a lot of people are just looking for an investment. And when you're starting to look for an investment and there's competition, that brings the rate of return down. And people are buying real estate for 3, 4, 5% return on investment. And that's not sustainable long term, in my opinion. But who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. Hopefully I'm wrong and it doesn't crash. But I think we're due for a correction.
What kind of a correction are you expecting? You're saying not as bad as 2008, 2009. What do you see on the horizon now?
See, inflation helps real estate in a lot of ways because it keeps the value. But, you know, the question is, if a house sells for $250,000 that used to sell for $150,000, the question is now, like the city of Albany, a building for $150,000, you're paying about $6,000 in taxes a year, $6,500. So now, are they going to reassess it to $250,000 and keep the same tax rate? So now all of a sudden you're paying $11,000 a year on a two-family in taxes, which is astronomical. So the question is, how are they going to, because if they increase those taxes to $11,000, that property value drops from $250,000 back down to $170,000 like that, because that's $300-$400 a month in lost revenue, the increase in taxes. So you really have to, from the city perspective, analyze and not overassess, or just because property's value go up doesn't mean you overassess and keep the same rate. If you're going to overassess, you have to keep the rate down. But as far as a correction, I don't know. I just feel too much money is out there chasing too low returns. Too many people are buying stuff that are not, they're going to wake up 2-3 years down the line and they're going to lose their shirt because they didn't know what it is to be a landlord. It's not easy. I'll give you an example. 2006, I sold 26 properties. By 2009, I bought back 13 of them.
Love it.
From foreclosure.
Wow.
So will it be as bad? Maybe, but I don't think it's going to be as drastic, but there's definitely there's going to be some problems, I believe.
So how are you preparing for this within your own business?
Get as much money lined up so when those deals come, you're able to act up. Get money together and say, so when those deals pop up, you know, you're ready to, you know, take advantage of the situation. It's almost like the same thing as a stock crash. You want to, you know, if a stock is going to crash and you firmly believe eventually it's going to go up, you know, you still have to do your own calculations.
Yeah, it's all about being a professional in the business, whether it be a stock investor or a real estate investor. You know, going back to what you were saying, it seems like the people that get hurt the most are the ones that want to jump in when it's really hot. You know, the people that are successful are the ones that have been in it, buying and selling in every market cycle. Going back to, you know, we both experienced that 2008, 2009 period in Albany. Tell us about when you started really buying, did you really invest a lot once that recession settled in 2009, 2010, up until now?
Yeah, I did. Um, I did. I probably acquired a lot. I would say 15 to 20 properties in that 3 year span, 2 3 year span. Um, Opportunities came back to reality, basically. You know, you make money on real estate when you buy it, on the buy, because that's you're generating the cash flow. Yes, it'd be nice to sell. I'm a cash flow guy. I'm not one of these investors that are flippers. Do I do a few flips a year? Yeah, but for the most part, I'm just I buy a property and I want to get my monthly milk bottle out of it, and just keep milking the cow. But with milking the cow and getting that bottle of milk every month, you still have to go in and feed it and take care of your houses. You have to you have to invest back into your properties, upkeep, maintenance, all that kind of stuff. It's not just getting that bottle of milk every month.
I like that cow analogy. That's a new one for me. Are you only interested in investing in New York, or have you looked at other states and other markets?
Here's my problem in life. Every time I invest in something that I don't know, I lose money.
Wise words.
And when I trust too many people, that's when you lose money. And I'm in Albany, so do I do I love the Albany area? I love Albany area. I love it's the easier pace of life. You almost feel like a shark in a pond rather than in New York City. You're a shark in the ocean, and there's millions of other sharks down there. And 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 down in Albany, it's just the easier lifestyle. The pace is easier. Everything is close. The problem is New York State's not going in the right direction as far as its treatment for business owners, landlords, um, and policies. So it is what it is. I would definitely love to venture out of New York. It just makes sure to have the right opportunities. I looked at other opportunities outside of New York 10, 15 years ago. Again, it was, I probably maybe looking back, I should have gotten involved with them. But like Bill knows, you got to be hands-on management and know and have your boots on the ground to really see and get a feel of what's going on.
I appreciate everything that you just explained about the city of Albany, and going back, 10 or 15 minutes ago, where we are seeing city of Albany trying to take on a lot of the New York City tenant laws and regulations, and the big concern of a poorly run city and how they're able to manage their city. Normally, they just want to raise taxes. In addition to a lot of the other stuff that we're dealing with in the city of Albany, specifically knowing that we have to be boots on the ground so we can make good investments. And we both know Albany so well, but I'm not an city of Albany player, so I feel like I have to venture out into the towns, which I still am very familiar with because they're run better. The school systems are better. Have you thought about that?
So it's funny you say that. Yesterday, I went out with a business. My lawyer it's one of his clients, and I met him once or twice before, and we went out and we talked and we fed off a lot of each other. And he's done really, really. He's a young guy, and he really kind of put the fire a little bit back into me, saying, "Hey, I've been doing it outside of the cities." He doesn't go into Albany or Schenectady or Troy. He's everything but those. And he's been doing really well, and he built up a very, very nice portfolio and opportunities that in the past I have not even ventured to go into. Um, I said to myself, maybe I should, but also I want to get to a position in like the student rental market. My business is very, very difficult dealing with kids. It's their first apartments, and you're dealing with 3, 4, 5 kids per apartment. You're dealing with 3, 4, 5 sets of parents. Every year they move in, every year they move out. Hopefully they renew for 1 year, but that's the max term we usually have on tenants are 2 years. And that really beats us up a lot with leasing and paperwork and collections. And it's a very tough business. Like I feel like I might only manage about 250 apartments, but I'm probably managing closer to 1,000 individuals, and that's what really makes it hard on our management. And the fact that I'm in right in the city of Albany, all within a 5 square block radius, it's definitely helpful for management. I manage almost like an apartment complex where I have a central office, and you walk out the back door of my office and the front door, you're covering 30, 40 properties within a 2 block radius. But, I think sometimes it makes the management a lot tougher when you're spread out all over the place. And you lose a lot of money on maintenance calls too. Because if you got to drive, the maintenance got to drive from Albany to Lansingburg to Niskayuna, back to Clifton Park, to Delmar, you're losing 2, 3 hours a day just in travel time with maintenance. Obviously, you want to try to concentrate them on those locations, but I feel like being spread out, it also it gives you that diversification play, which I feel, in my opinion, I woke up probably April, May 2020, June 2020, right when the pandemic started, and I realized how bad my non-diversification is towards business, because I am so concentrated on the Albany St. Rose market that once they shut down, I was having like 60, 70 apartments empty coming into the school turnaround. Luckily, we rented a lot of them over the summer once they announced school reopened, but still, it was very, I thought I was going to have to go back to a different business model in order to compensate, because if school didn't open, it would have been really hard.
No, I appreciate that. You have the economies of scale. You might have 40 buildings in 6 city blocks, but as you said, it's like having one big apartment complex, which really creates that efficiency. But then, as a lot of people realize, when a pandemic hits, boy, is that eye-opening. Your economies of scale, just plunged to the point where, okay, what do I have to do next to protect myself? Because, we're in control of our own destiny, which says, okay, how am I going to diversify? And even though it might not be as efficient like you've set it up in that student area of Albany, do you feel like you have to follow through and diversify into other towns and to continue to grow that way?
I feel that's definitely a smarter play for me, whether diversifying my real estate holdings into other towns, like you said. But again, what I want to do I want to buy more 2-family houses and let's just say Waterville, or do I want to buy a 10 unit, 15 unit, a whole apartment complex with 150 apartments? I think the bigger the project, the better it will be for me at this point in time. And also diversifying into maybe some commercial real estate. But again, the returns are very low compared to what we're used to on a 2-family house. But, the less work that goes into a strip mall or an office building, they all have their own problems, because my dad told me because I remember we were driving down Schenectady in 2005, 2006. All of the downtown area that's revived right now was all boarded up, closed up. And he's like, look, you see, people need a place to live. They don't need a place to run a business because they can go work somewhere else, but they don't need to open up a store. But someone has to have a place to live. So that's what always drew me more to residential. I do have one building that has 2 storefronts, and I'll tell you, dealing with store owners is like a totally different ball game. At the end of the day, it's their business, it's their livelihood, and if things are, thank God they're doing okay, but it's a lot easier to manage those type of people, and then the family that's barely making it and can barely put food on their table, but you have to evict them because they're not paying rent for the last 3 months. I remember a story, and it might sound cruel, but it just goes to show that I do have a good heart towards people. But it was this one tenant. She was on Section 8, and her monthly rent portion was $33. For 2 years, she didn't pay me. And I said, why don't you pay me $33? So out of principle, I said to her, I'm going to take you to court. So I took her to court. And at that point, it was like $700. And not, a good chunk of change, but I usually, for $700, I try to work a deal out and not get the person evicted. So I gave her a chance. And I gave her a payment plan. She didn't keep the payment plan. I gave her another warning. And then finally I said, screw it. I called her caseworker at Section 8. And I said, she's like, you need to do whatever you got to do. And I said, okay, I'm filing the paperwork with the sheriff. And I remember the sheriff calls me up. It was like 4 inches of snow on the ground. And I didn't have kids at the time. And the mom, the boyfriend, and the 2 kids are gathering their stuff as the sheriff is locking them out. And I said to them, look, I'll let you guys stay through the weekend. It was like Wednesday and it was a snowstorm. I said, they had like a TV that was, back then it was like a flat screen. So it was probably worth $1,500 at the time. I said, I'll hold on to that TV and you could stay for another week and a half. And it was such a sad sight to see the boyfriend grabbing the TV, standing outside with the TV in the middle of a snowstorm while the kids have their backpacks on and the mom has 2 luggages with her. And I felt so cruel on one hand, but it's like someone puts themselves in that position. And it was horrible to see, but sometimes that's part of the business. And I felt it. And I tried to do everything in my power to allow them. But if I would have just let them stay, I would have to restart the whole entire process over for eviction, which took me almost 2 years. And I hated doing it, but that's like one of those visions that have changed me as a person. And that's why I kind of started getting away from because situations like that just don't make you feel good, but it's because you just got to be hard as a businessman, and those are the decisions you have to make. But even though I gave the opportunity, hey, give me that TV. What good is the TV if you don't have a home to put it in?
Oh my goodness. I appreciate you sharing that story. And it's, oh my God, it's so sad, the choices that some people have to make, and we're left as business owners watching something that sad.
Yeah. I have another tenant. I remember it was on Lark Street in Albany. Their rent was $450 a month. This is back in like 2005, 6. And he didn't pay me rent for 4 months. When we went there with the sheriff to evict him, you walk in and he had a long hallway, and he must have had about 60 to 75 pairs of Timberlands that at that time I couldn't even afford Timberlands. It was $150, $200 of boot, and he had like 75 of them. And I'm like, you have over $10,000 in shoes here, but you can't pay me $450 in rent? That just goes to show you where their priorities were, and that's where you almost have to say to yourself, as Bill, we have a good heart and we try to do the best for our tenants, but if they don't want to help themselves, we can't help them.
And that's it. That's it. So we're left making decisions at some point, whether we want to participate or not with certain parts of this business. Asaf, I really do appreciate you as a great guest, and we really respect your time. So we'd like to wrap up this episode with a few questions. They say you have to have 3 of something to make a collection. So we have a collection of questions for you. Number 1, what is your 1 to 2 year business goal?
Hopefully diversify my portfolio into different ventures, which I'm in the process of working on, getting more involved outside of Albany or outside of the student market because I'm overly concentrated in it. But on the flip side, I'd love to continue running my business operation in a manner where I could be more hands off and just let other people do the job. And I really would love to take my family to live in Israel for 2-3 years. I grew up in Israel till I was almost 10 years old, and give my 2 young boys the experience of living in Israel, which really made a good footprint in my life.
Awesome. Our second question is your 1 to 2 year personal goal, which you may have just answered with that family story, getting your family to experience Israel. Do you have any other personal goals for the next 1 to 2 years?
I'm a very take no nonsense, very low filter, just very direct person. And sometimes I need to tame that down. And I remember when I first came up to Albany, I still had that New York City hustle bustle attitude, and people are like, "Yo, you got to calm down. You're upstate right now." And I think I've calmed down, and I'm sure if you speak to a lot of people who've known me over the years, I have. But I just remain cool, calm, collected. And the problem is I don't have time for people's BS anymore. I call them out on it, and they don't like it, but that's just the way I am. I don't have time to waste if you're just going to BS me and divert every single topic away from the actual topic that we need to discuss. And a friend of mine, actually one of my new employees who was a friend of mine and I hired him, said to me, if you allow other people's stupidity to get mad, you're the stupid one.
Yeah, getting sucked into someone else's comfort zone.
And that's what that's what I've been working on. Kind of not be as emotional and just say, hey, okay, whatever, and move on.
No, I'm with you there. I can appreciate that. Last question for you is, how can Steve and I or the listeners help you, and how do we contact you?
My email is asaf111@gmail, ASAF. And phone number is 588-2500. The phone line is always open. If you have a good deal, whether you want to partner up on something or any good venture that you're looking at that makes money and makes sense, then feel free to reach out to me. I'm not opposed to looking at anything and everything. Again, having partners is a very fine line you have to walk. You have to you have to know who you're getting in bed with. So, no divorce happens later on. No issues happen. And that's where I want to say thank you to my wife. She's a great, she's like my best friend, and she does an amazing job. And, she's very supportive. She does a great job with the kids at home. Everything she touches turns to gold. So I want to say thank you to her as well.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, partnerships you're really built on trust and rapport. So, getting into a real estate deal with a partner is a marriage in a sense. So, you're dead on there. If anybody enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, give us a 5-star review. And thank you for listening to the Collecting Real Estate podcast. Asaf, once again, you're a great guest. We appreciate your story and your insight. Enjoy the weekend.
All right. Thanks, guys. Have a good weekend. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Asaf.